Hi guys, and welcome back to my channel. Today I am here with the first update for my Panda palette for 2025. I can't believe I already worked on this palette for a month, although I don't know about you guys, but January has felt like the longest month ever. Yeah, it's just been an incredibly long month. I feel like everyone in the UK might be feeling the same with like other countries. But yeah, I think it's because we got paid like 6 weeks ago basically. So it's been a very long month. And I just feel in general, not just with the pay, but just in general, January has been going on for forever. So even though I feel like it's incredible that I already worked for this palette for a month, I also feel like I can't believe January is still going. So hope that makes sense. But yeah, I'm here today to update my Panda palette. As you might know, I am working on 2 palettes this year. I'm working on my Soft Glam palette, which I worked on last year as well. And I've also introduced a singles kind of companion palette to work with it. And those are the 2 kind of components of my Panda palette. So I'm going to jump into the progress, but before I do so, if you're new here, please consider subscribing. I would love to have you in the family. Let's jump into the video. So like I said, I do have 2 palettes. We have the Soft Glam and the Singles palette. I'm going to start off by talking about the Soft Glam first. So I'm going to insert the footage of what this palette has been looking like. Of course, I don't have too much footage, but this is what it looked like at the introduction. As you can see, I already had pretty good progress on it from previous years. So that is, yeah, what kind of where I stood. I have 7 shades left in the palette. However, I also decided to franken this palette in the past month just to get some more kind of transition shades. So I used a white and a beige shade, and I made some transition shades, and I did post that, but you can see what it looks like as well. And this is what the palette looks like today. So I do have some progress since last time. You know, nothing major, but I definitely have 2 big changes that I'm going to talk you through. So I'm really enjoying this palette and both the Frankens and the original shades, so let me talk you through the usage. Alright, so normally I'm going to have the pictures up here with the comparison, but I also have the palette right here just for the overview. So let me show you that again, but I'm going to talk you through again the shades in order. So the first shade that I have in the palette now is a transition shade. It's in the place of Tempera, and that is a mix between the shade Orange Soda as well as Dusty Rose, which is this shade. So these 2 shades make a beautiful transition shade for me, and that's kind of what is in the first place in the palette. And this shade, since franking in it, I have only used it twice, so nothing too much, but I'm still excited that I've used some use out of it. I feel like I've tried to play around with all of the transition shades in this palette just to get a feel of them. So yeah, 2 uses I'm happy with. Next to that we have another Franken shade, and this one is one where I used Mulberry, this dark kind of reddish tone shade right here. And this time I mixed it with a beige shade. It's actually a beige shade from a singles palette, which I'm going to talk you through in a second, of course. But yeah, that is also Franken, and this one I have used twice. This is a little bit more of a rosier undertone, but yeah, I really like that shade as well. Then next to that we have one of the original shades. This is the shade Orange Soda. I have used this one once, so I'll of course use the one to Franken. But I have used it once since then, so a little bit of use, nothing too much. But this one is quite thin in the pan now, as you might be able to see, hopefully. So I don't think it's going to take too long to finish it before the end of the year. But yeah, that is the next shade. However, next to it we have one of the exciting updates. This is another Franken shade, and this is the mix between Cypress Umber and that same cream shade. And Cypress Umber is that deep shade around here, and then yeah, just mix it with a kind of cream shade to make it a bit lighter. But this is the most cool tone transition shade in the palette, but I've really been enjoying it with some more cool tone looks that I've been doing in January. And as you might be able to see, I was able to hit pan on this shade, which is of course very exciting. It actually only took me 3 uses to hit pan on it, but when I used this shade, I used it in quite a big capacity. I used it like all over my crease, sometimes on my outer corner too for more light looks. So I think that's why I was able to hit pan on it. It was also a very, very thin shade. So yeah, excited to have a pan on it, and I think that's going to expand quite quickly because of, again, how thin it is. Then we have 2 empty pans, which I'm not going to talk through, of course, because yeah, nothing in them. However, the last shade on the top row is the shade Mulberry, which of course is again a original shade from the palette. And this one I have used twice, so a little bit of use on this one too. But I did also use this one Franken shade, so I guess it has gone down since like the introduction. But yeah, 2 uses since then, so nothing major. And this is definitely a shade I need to work on a bit more because it's one of the shades that I have the most product in it still. Alright, so we're moving on to the second row, and the first shade of the second row is again an original shade to the palette, and that is the shade Dusty Rose, which I mentioned earlier. So again, that was used in a Franken, but I did use this shade once on top of that. So yeah, one use only, nothing again too exciting. I've kind of spread my love, like I said, throughout this palette in the past month. It is the same with the next two shades as well. I only used these two ones, which are these two Franken shades right here. This shade is Mulberry mixed with a white, so again, this shade mixed with a white, which makes more of a purplish undertone shadow, as you can see. And then next to that, we have the shade Rustic mixed with a cream, which is this shade here, again, mixed with a cream, so that is that shade. And I used those two once each, just to see what the color looked like, but I definitely need to hone in on those more moving forward. Then we have a shade that I have done some amazing progress on. This is the shade Sienna, which is one that I had really good pan on before, but I repressed it when I did my Frankening video, as you might have seen it in that video. But I have also used this one a lot in the past month. This is definitely one that I'm getting quite close to finishing, as you can see. So pan expansion is amazing. Again, I obviously re-hit pan and then expanded that pan a lot, and I have used that one 11 times in the past month. So again, quite a high use, but that is that shade. Then we have 3 shades left in the palette, which is again 3 original shades. We have the shade Rustic right here, which I used twice. We have Cypress Umber, which I used twice, and then Noir I only used once. So that is the overview of this palette. Again, you can see the difference here. The main difference is again in Sienna, and then I hit pan on that Franken shade in the spot of Rose Pink. So that is the main difference with this palette. I'm going to talk you through the weight and everything of this palette in a second, but I'm going to move on to the Franken palette first. So we have the Franken palette right here, and again, I'm going to insert the footage of what this one looked like at the introduction. As you can see, this is just full of loads of different beautiful singles, so I'm excited to work on this one and get some use out of my beautiful indie shimmers. I did also use this one a little bit to Franken. I did just kind of use that base shade, so it is a little bit different because again I took some shade out. So that shade in the bottom right corner of the big singles is that shade that I used as my beige kind of cream shade, and this is what this palette looks like today. So there's definitely some differences in it. I have definitely focused on certain shades more than others, but I'm excited to talk you through the progress here as well and just my usage in general. Alright, so again, little overview right here. Again, we do originally have like one pretty big difference, but again, let's talk through each shade in order. So the first shade in the palette is from Terra Moons, and that is the shade Cinnamon Sugar, which is a beautiful kind of, it's like a rosy mauve based shadow with a green shift running through it. It's more of a satiny shade, but it's absolutely stunning and I really love that shade. In the past month I only reached for it once though, so not as much as I would have hoped, but it's definitely one that I'm going to try to reach for more now in February, especially because I'm panning some other pinks and I think this one is going to pair really nicely with those. Then next to that we have the iridescent shade from Glam Shop called Pilkoskowy, I believe. This is just speculating on what the names would be in Polish because it's a Polish name. But this one is one that I have reached for a little bit. I'm actually wearing this one on my inner corners today, and I have reached for it 6 times in the past month, so you know, a decent amount. It's not been my go-to inner corner, but I definitely reached for it a couple of times. I can't remember if I reached for it on top of my lid at any point or if it's just been on the corners, but it's definitely a shade that I can reach for in both of those capacities. Then lastly, for that first top row of those big singles, we have the shade Bismuth from the Pastel Roses. This is a beautiful kind of, it looks like a confetti shade. You can see there it has like a blue base into that pink, and then it also has some green to it, some gold. It's a very stunning shade. But this one I have reached for twice. It is quite a colorful shade, so I don't get as much use out of this one as some of the other ones, but I have still found ways to reach for this one, and it can be sheared out on top of the other things, and then mainly that like pink shift comes through. So yeah, I'm definitely going to try to reach for this one more. It is probably a shade in here that I'm most worried about finishing before the end of the year, but I'm happy that I got to use out of it in the past month. Moving on to the second row, again we're going to complete all those big singles first. We have the shade Bombawi, which is also from Glam Shop. This one already had pan on it at the beginning of the year, so did the first shade in the palette, by the way, Cinnamon Sugar. But this one I have used a handful of times. I actually reached for this one 3 times, so you know, nothing too extreme, but definitely enough I think to expand as pan. at least, I mean, I haven't looked back at the footage yet, but I think the pan has expanded on that one, which is really exciting. And I'm going to continue using this one. It's more of a kind of summery autumn shade for me, but it's also one of my favorite type of shifts. It's like a pink to gold shift with like a bronzy base. So a very, very beautiful shadow. So I'm excited to keep reaching for this one throughout the year. Then by far, one of my favorite shades in the palette, which is also one that I've focused on a lot in the past month, is that center shade of those bigger singles. And that comes from the Pastel Roses again, and it's the shade Starlight. So as you can see, hopefully in the pictures, I was able to pan on that shade. It's that one there in the center. So very, very exciting. It is my first new pan in this palette, and it took me 19 uses to hit pan, and I have used it 19 times in total. So definitely a lot of effort to hit pan on this one, but these singles are quite deep, and it was also a very full single. I think these Pastel Roses shades are quite deep. Looking at like how tall the pan is compared to some of the others, I do think it's some of the taller ones, so definitely not surprised that it took a bit longer, but I'm very excited because again, it's one of my favorite shades and I have loved reaching for that one. So that is Starlight. The next to that is actually another one of my favorite shades in the palette, but I haven't reached for this one too much because it is a little bit similar to Starlight, but it's not exact, but you know, it's a similar type of shade, and that is the shade Laser from Glam Shop. I have only reached for that one once, but it's definitely one that I want to focus on more. Maybe I'll switch my focus to that one in the next month, but we'll see what I decide to do. But definitely love that shade a lot, and I'm happy that I got at least one use out of it. Then we have the last row for those big singles, and the first one out of those is another Glam Shop shade, and that is the shade Vegas Bliss, which is, it looks a bit darker, but it can definitely be sheared out. Yeah, it's very beautiful, and I actually realized this is a dupe of the shade Blissful in the Huda Beauty Rose Quartz palette, which I'm also panning, so that has definitely hindered the use on the shade. But I did use it once at least, so I did get a use, which of course I'm excited about. Then lastly, for those round bigger singles, we have that cream shade, which is from NYX, and it's actually a depotted shade from the In Your Element Air palette, and I just call it Depotted Cream. And this one I have reached for a decent amount. I use this type of shade to buff out edges if I go to high on my crease shade, stuff like that. And I have used it 7 times in the past month. So again, pretty high, and I don't think it's going to be any issues at all to finish in the shade, especially if I need to continue using this one to franken my Soft Glam palette. So lastly for this palette, we have those Colourpop singles there on the side, and first up at the very top of those we have the shade Kaleidoscope, which was originally from the Dream Street palette, and this one I have reached for, I think, one of the highest, and the highest shade was that center shade though, but apart from that, this one is my second highest usage shade, and I have reached for this one 14 times in the last month. It is a really go-to kind of in the corner shade for me, and it works really nicely. It's not too intense, and it's just a beautiful shadow. So yeah, 14 uses on that one. I've only used it in the corner shade, and I'm hoping the pan has expanded a little bit, or that the dip has at least expanded, because again, I do have quite a high usage, so you would assume so, but we'll see. I'll have to have a look back at the footage to see if it has or not, but I'm going to continue using this one. Probably as an indie corner shade most of the year, and I also think I need to use it on my lid if I want to actually finish it, so I'm going to try to incorporate that into my looks in the month of February. Then under that we have another shade called Prima Drama. This is originally from the Sweet Talk palette. I depotted it because it's one of my pressed glitters, and this is the only shade in the palette that I have not used. Yeah, I haven't been feeling glitters on my eyes at the moment. I think this one is one that I'm going to incorporate on my nails a lot. I love using pressed glitters on my nails, but yeah, so far no use on that one, which is a little bit of a shame, but I'll definitely try to incorporate it into my next, into my looks for next month. And then the last shade in the palette is the shade Champs, which was originally from the Yes Please palette, so quite an old single. It was the first Colourpop palette that I picked up, so quite an old single, and this one is quite powdery as well, so I feel like the pan has expanded a little bit, even though I only reached for it 4 times, but yeah, hoping that the pan has expanded, and again you can see that in the pictures. But that is the last shade of this palette right here. Very excited with my progress, and that I was able to pan on one of these shadows. Okay, so that is the main progress of the palettes, but before I go through my goals, I want to go through the weights of this palette, or these palettes. We're going to start off again with Anastasia Soft Glam. So this palette has an advertised weight of 10.36 grams. However, again, I did pan this one in 2024, and I used 6.61 grams in 2024, which means that I have a remaining advertised weight of 3.75 to use in 2025. And in order to reach that, I need to finish up 0.31 grams per month to be on track. So that is my goal throughout the year. And my starting point at the beginning of this year was 156.09 grams. However, after franking in it, it weighed 156.48 grams, so it did go up a little bit. And now the palette weighs 156.12 grams, which means that I used up 0.36 grams. Again, that includes the franking use, of course, but yeah, still pretty good. And that means I also finished up higher than my average. I was 0.05 grams above what I wanted to do. So very, very happy with that palette and where it sits today. Then moving on to my BYOP, I don't have an average size weight for this one because obviously it is individual singles and I didn't add it all up. Some of them had pan and stuff like that already, so I didn't add that up. But at the beginning of the year, this one weighed 155.73 grams. So that's the starting point. And in the franken kind of that process that I did use some of that cream. I did actually end up using almost half a gram of that cream, so 0.49 grams. And the new weight of the palette at that point was 155.24 grams. So that's kind of like my starting point. And today the palette weighs 154.58 grams, which means that I was able to use 0.66 grams in the past month, which is quite high. But again, I've been focusing on this BYOP quite a lot. So very happy with that. And adding those two numbers together, so both my Soft Glam and my BYOP, I was able to, in January, use 1.02 grams. So slightly higher than a gram. And I think I need to look back at my last, like my introduction, but I think I had a goal of reaching for 1 gram per month. If that's wrong, I will put the real number on screen, but I think I mentioned that in the introduction. And if so, I was on track for January, so very, very pleased with that. So the last thing to do is to talk you through my goals for the next month. So we're going to start off with the Soft Glam palette right here. The first thing I want to do is I want to finish up the shade Sienna. I want that one to be gone next month. I think that's going to be quite easy. It's very thin, and yes, it's probably going to take, you know, another 10 uses perhaps, but I think I can do it in the month of February. Then I do think I want to hit pan on just 1 or 2 of the franken shades. I think I should say 2, because I think it's going to be quite easy. So I want to hit pan on 2 of those franken shades as well. So finish 1 shade and hit 2 more pans. That's going to be my goal for this palette. Then we have my BYOP right here, and with this palette here again, I also want to hit 1 more pan. I think again, it's going to be relatively easy. I don't think it's going to be as hard as hitting pan on this one. The one that I feel like that's going to happen with is the iridescent shade right here. You can see I have a little bit of a dip right there, and I want to focus in on that shade. So I think I can easily hit the pan on this palette, but that's going to be my first goal. I do also, like I said, want to focus in on this shade right here. So maybe I'll try to reach for that one 10 times. That's quite high, but I think I might try that. And then for a third goal with this palette, what do I want to do? Maybe I should just do no pan left behind on this palette, so use every shade at least once. I think that should be my third goal, just because again I haven't reached for this shade yet, and I feel like then I can keep using every single shade in here and get kind of spread use out of it. So I want to also completely no pan left behind. So hit 1 more pan, use that first shade 10 times, and then hit no pan left behind on this palette. So that's going to be my 3 goals for this BYOP. And with that, I'm going to wrap up this video. I really hope you enjoyed it. Let me know if you're enjoying my choices for this year. I for certain am. I've been loving using these 2 palettes. It's so much fun reaching for my singles because I have such beautiful eyeshadows, and these right here are some of my favorite type of shades, but they are also like dupe or like similar dupes to other things in my collection, which is why I want to pan them. So I'm really happy that I get to have some beautiful sparkly shifty shades to use in the everyday. And then the Soft Glam is like the perfect companion because these of course are mainly shimmers, and that palette is all matte, so they work really beautifully together, and the Soft Glam, especially after franking it, has some perfect kind of everyday shades for me. But I hope you guys are having an amazing day wherever you are, and I will catch you in my next one. Bye guys.